rest. And by coming to Christ, I receive salvation, which I experience in my own life and consciousness as rest from all the burdens of my sin. By believing that Jesus Christ has paid the price of my sin, I am free from the guilt of my sin, and I have assurance that my sins are gone, paid for in the blood of Christ. By believing that I am no longer accounted before God as an unclean, polluted sinner, I have assurance that I need not have any shame before God or my fellow man, because my shameful sins are not held against me. And by believing that I have been freed from the bondage of my sin, I have assurance that sin has no longer any power over me. And knowing this, and only by knowing this, that these benefits are mine, can I have assurance and rest, assurance and rest which Jesus promises in this text. Notice that the form of this coming is a command. It's in the imperative mood. Come. Come. It's not a suggestion which you may take or leave at your own good pleasure. It's a command which comes with the authority of Jesus Christ. Christ does not say, if you feel like it, you might consider coming if you have any time. He says, come. Come now. Don't delay. Come. And if you do not come, you despise the voice of Jesus Christ, and you incur his wrath, because this call is the summons of King Jesus. And you may not deny the summons of King Jesus without horrible consequences for your soul. Will you refuse to come? Will you despise this gospel call of Jesus Christ? For the one who refuses to come, for the one who will not believe in Jesus Christ, there is no rest, only guilt, only shame, and only everlasting damnation in the flames of hell. And so this is an urgent call to all who hear the gospel. Come. Come to Jesus Christ. Come now. And if you do not come, you will never, ever have any rest. But this is not an offer either. It does not depend upon the sinner for its fulfillment. This call comes not only with the authority of Christ as King, but with his power. And so when Christ calls his people unto himself with this mighty word, come, they do come. Jesus does not here express a desire to save everyone who hears him, as if salvation depended upon the sinner. Rather, Jesus Christ lovingly calls his own elect people unto himself. They are the babes in the context. Verse 25 hath revealed them unto babes. Notice in the context that God is hiding the truth from some and revealing it unto others. And it would be absurd to say that Jesus Christ is here trying to save everyone who listens to him, while at the same time God is hiding the truth from the wise and prudent. God and Christ are not at cross purposes. Rather, Christ issues a general call, a command to all who hear that they must come. And the elect, who are the babes of Christ, in whose heart God works by his Holy Spirit, they come. They come because they are irresistibly called. But the reprobate who also hear They despise this call of Jesus Christ, and they do not come. They do not receive the particular promise which is only to those who labor and are heavy laden, and they do not receive the rest promised in this text. But the believer comes. The elect come. They don't just come once when they're first converted. They keep on coming. Throughout their life, they come. Christ calls them continually to come, and they do come. Jesus calls Lord's Day by Lord's Day through the preaching. My people, exhausted by your struggle with sin throughout the week, come to me on the Lord's Day, and I will give you rest. And Jesus calls out to us as we stray from him and follow after the world. My people, do not think that you can find rest in the vanities of this world. Come on to me, and I will give you rest. And when it comes to that time when God's people must die, Christ calls to his people, come on to me. Do not fear. I have destroyed death. I have prepared a place of rest for you. Come on to me. And God's people are called effectually by the voice of Jesus Christ into the very presence of Christ in their soul. And one last time, Christ will say, come. On the last day, when he comes down from heaven, he will call with a mighty voice, come. And God's people will be called effectually out of their grave, and they will come to him in the body and receive rest in their body and in their soul for all eternity. But to whom does Christ promise rest here? The promise is not to those who are not heavy laden and burdened. He says, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Notice the qualification. All of the promises of God are qualified. For example, in Isaiah 55 we read, woe unto everyone that thirsteth, not woe unto everyone, full stop, but woe unto everyone that thirsteth. And here we have not come unto me everyone, full stop, but come unto me all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Not everyone is one who labors and is heavy laden. Many do not feel this burden of sin. Many are hardened in their impenitence and unbelief, and they refuse to come to Jesus Christ and refuse to acknowledge that their sin is a burden. This was true in the day of Christ when he first spoke these words. Think of the scribes and the Pharisees. They were not burdened. They were not heavy laden. They were smug and self-satisfied and self-righteous sinners who believed that they could please God by their works. They did not feel this terrible burden of sin. He wanted to be released from the oppression of the Romans. But when they heard that Jesus Christ was not a Messiah who would release them from the Romans, they hated him and sought to destroy him. And so Christ does not promise rest or salvation to the self-righteous and smug. Rather, he threatened them. He threatened them in verse 24. It shall be more tolerable for the land of Sodom in the day of judgment than for thee. That's not a promise of rest, that's a threat of eternal damnation. And today too, there are multitudes of sinners who have no sense of this burden of sin.